Our next speaker is the Cook County Board President. Prior to that, she served as the alderman of the 4th Ward and has been a dedicated community leader and public servant for over 2 decades. Ladies and gentlemen, Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle. Madam President.
Good afternoon. I'm very grateful to be here today. Our guest is Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart. As many of you know, he went to Providence College and is a graduate of Loyola University Law School. He's a former prosecutor, and actually I came to know him when he was in the state legislature, where he was a progressive member of that body for many years. He's here with his wife, Patricia. They live in Chicago, and they're proud parents of 5 kids, who I think are all here today. So. I just want to thank him because he has been a partner in our efforts to improve criminal justice in Cook County. He's worked very closely with the clerk around computerization of our files for detainees, which has been a problem for a long time, and he's, as I said, worked very closely with Clerk Brown around that issue. He's highlighted the great struggle we have in our criminal justice system with mental illness, that our jails, and it's not just in Cook County, it's across the country, that our jails are in fact mental institutions. 1/4 to 1/3 of the population on any given day consists of people who struggle with mental illness. So he's not only been a partner in our effort, as I said, to improve the criminal justice system, he's raised issues that are really important on the national scene as well. Please welcome Tom Dart.
Oh, thank you so much, Tony. I really appreciate that. The partnership with you has been phenomenal. I cannot thank you enough. The work we've done over the years in the jail and in jail reform was, to be honest with you, a lonely fight. And since you have been there, it has been nothing like that. You've been so helpful. I cannot thank you enough. I don't know how we'd be able to get this stuff done. As some people in this room might know, at one point, I used to have occasional tiffs with our presiding judge. Now I don't do it as often. Somebody else does it, yes. No, I mean, there was a certain level of frustration. I can just tell you this as an aside. Both Tony and I both want to get things done, and more of the same does not work. And after extended periods of time talking with people, trying to get them to try to work with you, then at some point you do have to push it a little bit. But as I said, it was a very lonely fight for many years. Having Tony there has just remarkably transformed so many things. Things I couldn't get even beginning, we've actually concluded it. So Tony, thank you. If this is a little more choppy than normal, folks, we had a little scheduling conflict. My kids, who are here with me today, this is their spring break that we traditionally, I finally take a few days off of work, and this is in the middle of it, so I was with them all day the last few days, and so I just flew into town and I was writing my speech as I was sitting there. So it could be a little bit choppy, so I apologize up front. We are going to use some videos, which will be nice because then I won't look as foolish and I can then do something else while you're watching that. I do want to thank people who put this together, everyone who showed up here, and particularly the people who put the seating chart together, because they have finally nailed it. John Fritchie has made the children's table. Yes. You guys just don't know how appropriate all this is. I struggled with what I was going to talk about today because I remembered after the last one, I seemingly overlooked the fact that you serve lunch here, and I talked about John Gacy too much, and that posed a problem to a lot of people. So I knocked that off my list of things to talk about. But truly, our office is such an amazing place. It's the reason I love working there. It's the reason I enjoy it so much, is because it's an office where you can impact so many people's lives and you can do so many things quickly and with a great deal of urgency. And that's why I love it. That's why I enjoy it so much. It's why I could not conceive of how I could ever get involved with the legislative body again, where you have countless hearings and task forces and all the rest of it, and sometimes to no end. Our office, you're able to intervene quickly. And as a result of that, we've intervened in many, many topics, and one is probably as worthy as the next. But when I was thinking about what to talk about, I thought the best topics to pick would be ones that, frankly, we collectively should all be engaged with. And the two topics that I selected that I wanted to talk about today really share that common thread. They're topics that impact all of us, and really should. The one is the mental illness issue that Tony referenced. I've talked a great deal about it, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an update on it, but clearly it's something that we all should be engaged in. It impacts so many people, and it's something that I think we as a society have not done nearly what we should be doing in that area. The other area, though, thank you. The other area I wanted to highlight, though, is similar in the fact that it gets brushed aside by so many, and that is when I talk about communities that are distressed, for the lack of a better word, distressed communities. We all are accustomed to the fact that when you turn your faucet on, water comes out, you flip a switch, the lights go on. When you call 911 if you need that, police show up. That's our normal. That's our normal. Envision a place where that does not happen. When you pick up the phone, the chances of you having the police show up and actually solving any type of problem is minimal. That happens so much more than you could ever imagine. But think about it for a second, not just that in and of itself. Think about if that's your normal. Not just your normal for a day or two, normal for your entire life, for decades. That is what your lot in life is. To live in a community where your law enforcement is marginal at best, at times corrupt, and at the end of the day does not provide any type of justice, something that we all take for granted. And what we have come to find out is that's so much more pervasive than you could ever imagine. And it's something we got engaged in pretty much when I became sheriff. Literally within months of becoming sheriff, the town of Fort Heights, which I was eminently familiar with from my days as a prosecutor, their police department vanished. They took off. They weren't getting paid, they left. And that town had no police department. We came in and took it over, and we've been there since then. What we found out when we got there was not, frankly, a surprise to me. Because when I was a prosecutor in the late 80s, early 90s, I focused almost primarily on Fort Heights at times, to the point where my former supervisor said my legacy was they're going to rename the town Dartville. I was like, fantastic. I knew the people out there, I knew the government, I knew the police department. When I left, I helped put together the case that eventually ended up sending the police chief and most all of the police department to prison. It wasn't hard. When I would have cases, I would talk to the witnesses who frequently would say to me, you know, State's Attorney Dart, why are you messing with me? We all know the chief's the biggest crook in town. And I was like, I know that, you know that, but I need someone to testify for me. And he's like, well, I'm not going to testify because he kills people all the time. And I was like, well, I can't necessarily argue with you on that one. That is a valid concern. But the reality is, we were unable to get anything done until we were able to get him out of there. And working with the federal government, he and most of the police department was sent away. Well, come to find out, fast forward to the 2000s, not a lot had changed. The department was a complete disaster. So we're brought in. We're brought in not because we chose it that day, but because they vanished. We get in there, what do we find? We find the obvious, raging incompetence everywhere. We walk into the evidence room, which I had been in before, and it had not changed a lot. We found barrels of guns, never checked, never run, some of them still loaded. Really, you had to be careful with the drums because it could go off. But we also found a refrigerator, a little refrigerator that was sitting there, and inside, covered, encrusted in mold, were evidence kits for rapes that had been sitting there for God knows how long. We were able to pull the mold off most of them, submit them, and I think there was 2 cases we were able to bring to conclusion as a result of that. This was something that, you know, once again, in the city of Chicago, would you have ever thought something like this? Of course not. This has happened there. It's happened in other places. We then subsequently been brought into numerous other towns. The town of Dalton had all sorts of crises when the administration changed. We came in and assisted them in quite a few different ways. They have a very stable police department right now, but we still assist them, time and time again. We do that in many other towns as well, some more often than others. The town of Dixmoor now has engaged us too, where we are working with them on numerous things. One is their evidence room, complete disarray. The police chief called us and said, listen, I'm new here, please get in here. I don't know what happened here. So we're intimately involved with that part of it. We're intimately involved with them on numerous cold cases that they have as well that we're happy to help out with. So it's something where it's been an ongoing thing that we're working on and working with these people. But as I say, the overarching thing, this isn't just statistics, people. Think about the folks who live in these communities where this is their normal. This is not right. It is absolutely wrong. And we have gotten more and more engaged in this. And I can tell you, really, from the start, this has been difficult. Difficult because the sheriff's office has always been involved with it, different communities, but it's usually been one case at a time. You'd get a phone call, you'd go out there, you'd help them with one matter, and then you'd go away. I always thought my mandate was larger than that. My mandate was to ensure that in these communities, there was some level of justice there. They're in the county of Cook. They need and they deserve justice. The people do. And I cannot tell you the pushback I get from mayors, from police chiefs, that I need to mind my own business, that I need to move on. And even within my own department, there's been people saying, we got enough to keep ourselves busy. We don't want to step on people's toes. And I keep posing to people, if we don't do it, who is going to do it? And the answer is nobody. And nobody does it, and this perpetuates itself. And you have decades and decades of communities that live in this type of distress that none of us would agree is acceptable. And yet it continues. And so we have pushed our way forward. And as I say, have clearly alienated loads of mayors and police chiefs. But as I've told people long ago, those are not the people I was elected to represent. It's the people within these towns. And the fact they don't like me, I just absolutely don't care. It really doesn't matter to me. Could absolutely care less. I'm not invited to their golf outings. I'm not invited. And the reception we receive at their meetings is not positive. One of the other towns you may have heard of before that we have gotten involved with as well is the town of Harvey. Now, the town of Harvey, the Tribune, Phil Cadner, they've done just masterful jobs of highlighting these problems out there. And Phil, my God, Phil Cadner writes for the Southtown, one of the best writers you're ever going to see. He's been writing about the south suburbs for decades, absolute decades, highlighting what most of us, once again, would never accept. In the town of Harvey, year after year, Harvey's report the highest rate of violent crime of any suburb with more than 500 residents in the 6-county region. The arrest rate has been lower than that of any other Chicagoland community battling violent crime. In 2007 to 2011, Harvey had 54 slayings with 16 arrests. So that's less than one arrest for our 3 cases. But 3 years ago, when they asked me, at that point, we go through this dance, they asked me to help them on some cases, and I come in, and then we are not asked to help again. They asked me to help with cold homicides, and I asked them, fine, I'll be happy to do that. How many do you have? And they didn't know. And I said, well, that actually is a pretty basic type of function. You count the bodies. And they did not have that number nailed down. And we went ahead, we were able to help on a couple of the cases, but then it got tricky again. Harvey's recorded, since 2007 to 2011, almost 2,500 other violent crimes with only 258 arrests. So that's 1 arrest for every 9 cases. In 2007, we went in there and discovered hundreds of evidence kits for rapes that had never even been tested. What we thought was a positive thing to do was to try to get people more engaged with all the different towns. One of the other things that Harvey had going for us is there's a state statute that requires that every year you fill out a basic financial audit form and you send it to the comptroller's office. A handful of towns have not done it. Harvey hadn't done it in years. So what we suggested is, opposed to just waiting for the latest bomb to go off, that when a town does not file these basic forms, and mind you, there's only a handful of them that haven't done it, that if that occurs, then we would have our county board vote on allowing me to come in as the inspector general into that town to get their audit done and to check and make sure their evidence room and everything else is in order, because we found that the two were somewhat connected. When the finances were all goofed up, the police part of it was usually pretty screwed up too. Well, we have gotten nothing but pushback on that ordinance. The mayors and managers want nothing to do with me coming in their town. We went to a South Suburban Mayor's meeting where they chose to be their spokesman for this issue, Mayor Eric Kellogg of Harvey, who then proceeded to hand out a copy of a newspaper article about a jail lawsuit against me, which was an outrageous lawsuit that, honest to God, I would take hours to explain to you the outrages involved in that thing. But he handed that out as a way of explaining to the mayors that I should have better things to worry about than looking into his town. And so the mayors then roundly decided this ordinance wasn't for them. And so I told them, I go, listen, I'm quite a busy guy. I'm not looking for more work to do, but I refuse to sit around and wait for the next disaster, and then we all act surprised, and we said to ourselves, well, someone should do something about this. Where people collectively choose to do nothing because it's not their town, it's not in their backyard. So why are we going to do this? As I say, it's the very pushback we have gotten throughout our endeavors on these issues. And the one where, to me, was the starkest, but the other ones we haven't been in as much to really find all this stuff out, has been our work in the town of Robbins. Our involvement in Robbins came twofold. It came because we started doing an analysis of state audits that they do on rape kits, they call them. Rape kits are after a woman who's been sexually assaulted, she goes to a hospital, they do basic type of DNA analysis work, and then they take it and they send it back to that police department, who's then supposed to send it to the state police to be analyzed. So this is standard. It's been done for, decades. This audit showed that in the town of Robbins, there was an anomaly. Their numbers weren't matching at all. And there was some other towns where they had the same issues, but Robbins was way out of kilter. In addition to that, Robbins' police chief at that time had just picked up his second DUI. So with that, I was of the impression it was time for me to get very involved with the town of Robbins. And it wasn't because of an outreach, it was because we knew that something needed to get done. And I cannot tell you the pushback that I got from that, and still do it sometimes from different people. And I keep explaining to them, I go, do we not have this common notion that justice is something everybody in these communities deserve? And that I'm not supposed to just sit by the phone and wait for the mayor or the town that's overseeing this debacle to call me. Of course they're not going to call me. But at some point, you need to move ahead and get involved with these issues. What we found out was just absolutely mind-numbing. Things that, once again, folks, nobody in this room would ever stand for, nobody in this room would ever find acceptable, but this was the normal. And what the normal was is when we went into the evidence room, we found just stacks and stacks of sexual assault kits sitting there. We found barrels of guns, which we had been assured had all been traced. Not one of them had been traced, because we went ahead and did it anyways. But the sexual assault cases were the ones that particularly were outrageous. I mean, we had just a litany of them, but I'm going to walk you through three of them in particular here, and I asked my wife to leave with the kids for a little bit here. Okay, so February 2013, we were granted access to their evidence room. We immediately recognized that the evidence room was in serious disarray, and there were not only untested rape kits, but many more rape kits that were tested, but inexplicably still in the evidence room and not part of a prosecution. In all, 176 rape kits dated between 1978 and 2012 were inventoried by our office. The evidence room also contained 55 guns that were never sent to the ATF for training. Of the 176 rape kits, 55 were not sent to the lab for analysis prior to our getting involved. The remaining 121 kits had a lab seal indicating at least a preliminary analysis was conducted. However, the results of the case were unclear and doubtful, since many had been gathering dust in the evidence room for decades. Our office requested police reports corresponding to the rape kits, but the Robbins Police Department was only able to locate 45 police reports corresponding to the 176 sexual assault cases. It is unclear as to whether a police report was ever generated in relation to the remaining 131 cases. No other evidence or documented follow-up was ever located related to any of the 176 cases. By working with the state crime lab, the sheriff's office has been able to locate many of the lab reports that were generated and sent to Robbins after preliminary analysis. Many of these state crime lab reports simply indicate that DNA material was present and requested permission from the Robbins Police Department to complete the DNA analysis, The Robbins Police Department never responded to the lab to do these analyses. We're aware of only 8 cases that were reported to the state's attorney's office out of the 176. In approximately 10 other cases, the DNA hit to a profile in the CODIS system. The CODIS system is where you put the DNA of former offenders in there. At least 11 of the 176 cases, the lab reports were sent to either Officer James Cooper or Officer McGee. They were officers who were indicted in 2000 on federal extortion and racketeering charges for taking money from drug dealers. It was clear from the start that despite our best efforts, many of the victims would never see justice. Simply too much time had passed. However, our investigation led us to Antonio Carmichael, a career criminal who we found to have been the perpetrator of 2011 rape of a 19-year-old that was never investigated. The family had given up. However, with the work of our officers and detectives, we were able to bring that one to conclusion. These are more the numbers part of it, but I'm just going to highlight 3 of the particular cases because the whole thing is just so outrageously heartbreaking. When we first came into Robbins to sort of try to make sense of this thing, it was in February of 2013, I decided to host a town hall meeting to let the people in the town realize that we were going to be there and what some of the issues that we had found already and that we needed them to trust us and come forward and we would try to help them. And when we walked through some of the preliminary findings about the rape cases, people were a little bit startled, but also in addition, we had a litany of people just telling us about how they've been terrorized. We had this hall filled with people talking about how they've been terrorized for years by individuals who were committing crimes, burglaries, you name it. Senior citizens particularly were talking about how they couldn't go to church anymore because whenever they went, the gangbangers knew when they left and they'd break into their house and steal their TV and whatever. The one woman was particularly incensed because she said, I know who did the one at my house. And when it was asked how did she know this, she said because it was her grandson. And she had gone to the police department and had explained that to them, and they had done nothing about it. We were able to solve this burglary ring within a week that had been sitting there, that had kept these people locked inside their houses. But at the end of the town hall meeting, I had a woman come up to me, because we'd explained that we had these rape kits going back to 1980. She came up to me and she said, the kindest, nicest woman, honest to God, I wanted to start crying because she was so humble and was almost acting as if she was bothering me. And she said to me, Sheriff, have you got anything on the rapes from the 70s? And I was like, I'm sorry. I go, I just have the ones from '84. I go, you aware of the rapes in the 70s? She goes, I was raped in the 70s and nothing ever happened. And I was wondering if you could maybe look into that. And I was just like, oh my God. And so we got in touch with her immediately. Her name, I'm going to mention, the other ones I'm not, because Rose has been very much of an advocate now on trying to change some of this stuff. Rosa, as I mentioned, had come forward to me, asked me about her case. It was from 1977. In 77, she was 17 years old. She was attacked from behind with a belt as she walked to her sister's birthday party. She was dragged to a vacant field where she was raped and beaten. She pleaded with her attacker to let her live, and the only reason he let her live is that she had convinced him that she didn't have her glasses on, and she didn't, and that her glasses were really thick and she couldn't see anything. And he went through her backpack and in fact found some really thick glasses. And so that was the only reason he let her live, because he was going to kill her otherwise. Eventually he took off and she was taken to a hospital by a passing motorist. They had a rape kit complete at the hospital and a Robbins police officer came to take her statement. She never again heard from the Robbins Police Department. Her rape kit was not even among the 176 that we found in that room. In addition, the Robbins Police Department couldn't locate a police report for her case. We dug through file cabinet to file cabinet. We found like a little card that at least acknowledged that that she'd been sexually assaulted. And Rosa, she's such an amazing woman. She was just thankful us to find that because she found that there was some type of acknowledgement that this event occurred because we found this card. Victim number 2. In April, we received a call from a friend of Rosa's asking if I'd found her rape kit. In November 1991, she was 14 years old. She was walking home from the bus after basketball practice when she was attacked at 137th and Kedzie and dragged to a nearby creek. She was raped, beaten, and her attacker tried to drown her in the creek. She eventually played dead until the offender ran away. She was picked up by a motorist who noticed that she was wet despite the November temperatures. She was taken by ambulance to the hospital where a rape kit was completed. Again, Robbins Police Department took her statement, and again, she never heard from them again. Her rape kit was among the 176 inventoried by us when we went into the evidence room. The lab indicated that although DNA material was present, it had not been analyzed because they never received authorizations from Robbins to consume the sample for analysis. Our office had the kit analyzed at our lab, and the sample hit to an offender in the CODA system named Carl Flowers. Flowers had a lengthy criminal history and had recently completed a 14-year sentence for armed robbery and aggravated battery. In October 2013, Flowers was located in Lancaster, Nebraska jail on a domestic battery, and we traveled out there and we interviewed him. He admitted to having sex with a 16-year-old by the creek in '91, but he said he ran away when she said, "You're raping me." Despite the victim's status as a minor at the time, the statute of limitations expired, so we literally couldn't do anything with the case. The case that we clearly could have proven in seconds if people had done basic work. Victim 3 was an acquaintance of her offender, Anthony Carmichael. In June 2011, he picked her up and they drove to his cousin's home in Robbins. At a certain point, he sexually assaulted her. When she told him that she didn't want to continue, he forced himself, he held her by the throat, threatened to kill her, and then he raped her. He eventually fell asleep. She got away, and she went to a hospital for a rape kit. A Robbins detective took her statement again. The detective came to her home 2 different times to show her photos, and she picked him out the second time in the photo. She knew who he was because he was a friend of the cousins. So this wasn't a whodunit. They knew exactly who it was. They identified the offender. She never heard from the Robbins Police Department again after that. On July 21st of 2011, the state police sent a detective from Robbins a lab report stating that the DNA had been indicated and it would be held because they had a match. In October of 2013, we sent finally got the report finalized from the victim based on a buccal swab of Carmichael. Because in 2011, he, shortly after, so this sexual assault had occurred in June of 2011. In November of 2011, he had raped 2 other people. He was arrested. He did those rapes in Chicago. He was arrested by Chicago, and he was incarcerated as a result of that. We went down to Illinois Department of Corrections, where he's at now. We questioned him. He confessed to the sexual assault in less than an hour, gave a full confession, including an apology to the victim, and we've got criminal sexual assault charges against him as a result of that. So we were able to bring some conclusion to that case. The rest of them, though, folks, there's virtually nothing we can do because the statute of limitation is run on almost all of those. What was this police department like? As I mentioned to you, as we came in, the police chief had just got his second DUI. It's a part-time police department. Often the officers utilize their law enforcement job as a stepping stone to get work at doing security at Target or Walmart, where they can make more money than they can doing part-time police work in Robbins. Robbins doesn't employ detectives, evidence technicians, or juvenile officers. Probably as distressing as they were trying to change things after I got involved there. They said they got a new chief, new assistant chief, all that stuff. It became increasingly clear that many of their part-time officers at the time had none of the training you required. It's like a baseline training. The training board then uncovered that their new police captain had lied about all of his past experience. And the proof of it was, to show you how insane this whole thing is he had sent in to the police board to get his sign-off to be a police officer as proof that he's an officer, a photocopy of his badge. Well, it turns out the badge that he photocopied and sent in was the badge of Joe Friday from Dragnet. I kid you not. That was his proof that he was, in fact, a real police officer. We have been doing all the patrols in Robbins since then because the place is in such disarray, and we've been incredibly engaged in it. As I say, we have uncovered more and more as we've been involved there, but probably the most obvious and egregious one was when we came across the fact that a company had negotiated with the outgoing mayor, who was a very nice woman, but was clearly suffering some illnesses at the time, possibly dementia. They had entered into a contract right before she left to turn over a third of the town into a quarry via quick take. And virtually no one in the town had heard about this. And literally the contracts, everything was signed and it was done. And the county, their village board had passed it. And we stumbled across it because people started coming to us with these concerns about this quarry. And we didn't know what they were talking about first. And the more we looked into it, the more we had concerns about it. We opened up an investigation about it, and we found that there were some bizarre campaign contributions that were tied to the quarry issue. We also found this quick take that they were pushing was very unusual for that town. And then we found that the company that was at the heart of this was based out of an apartment in Riverside. All of this, as I said, was done as the mayor, who is a very nice woman, had been forced through at the very end. We've got that stopped right now, but it is an example of the many, many things that go on. And I just can't emphasize enough to you folks, put yourself in that town. There are the most tremendous people I've gotten to meet that live in that town, and day out, this is their normal. And we have something that we put together on the quarry, just that we did the other day, that I thought might be interesting.
At first, I didn't really know too much about it. All I knew is what I overheard certain people say. Robins do need jobs, but not to the point where it uprooting and taking people out of their homes and just to make another person wealthy. I mean, some of the people in Robbins been in here for 20, 30 years or more. And I don't think it's fair that they should be able to come in and take people homes from them, and they have no say-so about it.
Because instead of telling everybody that it's going to be okay and, and letting you know in advance or ahead of time, they just pretty much threw everybody under the bus and let everybody fend for themselves. The ones who knew. The ones who didn't know, who cares?
It's not fair for them to come in and want to take these homes away from these people. These people work hard to get what they got. And for someone else to come in and try to take it away from them with no say-so from the people who own the homes, that ain't right.
It's just not fair. At the end of the day, people are all family out here. It's a community of people who love each other, who appreciate what's, each other. We have family barbecues. We come together when, it's time for us to come together. It's sad,
You don't want nobody coming and take your home from you. I mean, if Sheriff Darton was on board with us keeping our home, I would appreciate something like that, because everybody else trying to pull it away from you. If you got one person pulling towards helping you keep it, you on board with them.
So, folks, I've been told I've already exceeded my time, and I haven't got to my second topic yet. As you can see from this and from what I've been telling you about, this is a mess out there. It's something that we all need to be engaged in. I can't emphasize enough to you that people out in these communities are phenomenal people, and they deserve so much better than this. And they certainly deserve elected officials who are engaged, involved with these issues, and not walk away and say it's not my job. Clearly this is somebody else should do. Those are the excuses that have got us in this mess. People keep referring to the kick the can notion, which I hate the phrase, but it's true. Well, people just narrowly interpret their job, and then by doing that, it's really no one's responsibility. And in the end, you get these messes. And one of the other issues that we've taken on to try to help, though, is not just to go in it from the law enforcement side, but to try to restore these communities. And one of the ways we've done that is I've taken inmates who are serving sentences for me, and I put them into this neighborhood restoration project. And what we do there is we take down abandoned buildings, and we then recycle what we can. It teaches the detainees actually a very useful skill, because there's so many abandoned buildings out there, and it's definitely a skill that they can use, and people will hire former felons to do this job. But for these communities, they have no money to take these buildings down themselves. So this is the only option they'll ever have. And there's particular houses, particularly in Robbins, that just really get me. I drive through Robbins a lot, and I'll look at these houses where you'll have these meticulously taken care of lawns, gorgeous houses, and literally within 2 to 3 feet, a burned out wreck that's been there for decades. And you sit there and say to yourself, these poor people, they couldn't sell that house if they wanted to, especially in the economy we have, and they're destined to live next to that. That's wrong, absolutely wrong. And so our program with the inmates has taken down, I believe, 5 houses to date so far. We just started it in November. of this past year. We have high hopes from a lot of different sources that we're going to have a lot of people engaged with helping us with this. But it's our way of attempting to come up with solutions, not just engaging these towns, but then coming up with solutions to try to restore some of these towns and villages. The final topic that I'm literally going to blow through in 5 seconds here is the topic about mental illness that I have been beating the drum on, and we're going to continue to do it. Just think of this for 1 second. There are now 10 times more people with serious mental illness in state prisons and county jails than there are in state mental hospitals. 10 times more. In 44 of the 50 states, the largest single mental health institution is a prison or a jail. In Illinois, it's us. The current situation is remarkably similar to what existed in the 1830s when Dorothea Dix began the reform movement to move mentally ill individuals from jails to mental hospitals. What I've tried to explain to people is, if you take the historical perspective on this, where we're right now in the world, in history, in time, we should be outrageously embarrassed because we literally have gone back to what it was like in the 1830s. In the 1830s, people, prior to that, people were housed with mental illness, housed in jails and prisons. That's where they were kept. That was what they did. They had a big reform movement. They built state hospitals, the right to treat people. And then there was the big sort of pushback, but a lot of it very, very appropriate, because some of the hospitals were being misused to warehouse people. So back in the 1950s, there was this movement to get people out of the hospitals into the community. Very noble thought, a lot of very, very intelligent, thoughtful people behind that. The goal was noble, but there was no funding to it. And so people struggled. They did the best they could, the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, to find places for mentally ill in the community, and they did their best. It has since, in the 2000s and where we're at now, it has completely cratered. The cuts to the mental health funding across the board have been horrible. I mean, the amounts just in this state alone have been some of the worst in the country. And as a result of that, once again, this is not higher math. These people have to have a place to go. Where are they ending up? They're ending up in the jails and prisons throughout this country. And now, are there mentally ill people who have committed bad, horrible acts? Yes, they are. There are. And there are some of them in my jail. They're the minority, though, the absolute minority of the people that I have in the jail. And they're going to get the proper treatment. They will not be out on the streets. They are going to either be in a jail, a prison setting, or a mental health hospital the rest of their lives. The largest group of them, by far, though, are people that are in there for minor offenses. Minor offenses, but frequently, they have no money. They've burned through their families. Over and over again, their families have tried, and there's no support systems out there, and it has run its course. So they have no one to come bond them out. So many of them have insignificant bonds, but they can't get anybody to pay that amount. Or frequently what we have is people have no bond on them. Why do they have a no bond? Is it the nature of the offense? No, it's a goofy case. It's not something of a criminal mastermind nature. It's a goofy case that they haven't shown up for court at. And so the judge issues a no bond warrant for them. We pick them up. They're not hard to find. And then we bring them in. They can't post a bond because they don't show up for court. So they sit there. And the sad thing about it is that many, many of them will tell me, absolutely across the board, the best treatment they get is in the jail. That is sad and that is horrible, and it's a horrible statement of our society that we collectively think that's okay, that it's not our issue, not our problem. It will be our issue. It will be our problem. It's just a question of when, because there are so few solutions out there now. We've been doing some things that I have been told are quite innovative. We work with some phenomenal partners in the Cermak Health Hospital system that are just incredibly caring people who work with us day in, day out for the people that are in our custody. And my staff has just been involved with some outrageously innovative things that try to divert people on the front end, and then once they're in our custody, working with Cermak Hospital to make sure they're treated appropriately. But then, once again, working with Cermak to actually have an exit plan. Forever, our exit plan was, there's the door, we'll see you later, and people would just wander out at all hours of the day or night out onto California Avenue with their little baggie of drugs, and that was it. And there was no other support system. What we've done now is working with groups like NAMI, and once again, Cermak, we have some semblance of plans. We drop people who are mentally ill into certain holding areas before we release them. We give them talks, we give them some type of information. NAMI puts a little movie together for them as well. And then we set up a hotline that we do ourselves, that my upper level staff, they rotate carrying the pager, and it's for detainees who have left us and their families. And I cannot tell you, it goes off often, and the stories are heartbreaking. And then we're scrambling to try to find in the middle of the night someplace for these people to go. So as I said, this isn't something that we're going to solve it tonight, but there are eminently doable plans out there if we care. If we care. All we have to do is care. If we care, we can do some things. The expense to me is outrageous. As I always tell people, I go, if you don't want to take this on the human side of it, don't want to take it, that's fine. On the financial side of it, we couldn't be more stupid if we wanted to. This is money that's going down the drain. We get people stabilized, we treatment done for them at the jail, once again, not a hospital, at the jail, and then we send them out to the street with no support system. Where are they going to go? Of course they're coming back to me. And we have all the numbers to show that they come back in over and over and over again. And so with a modicum of expenditure of case management on the way out to work with people for housing and make sure that they stay on their meds, we will keep people from coming in as frequently. Some of them might still come in, but it won't be as often. And some people we might never see again, which is really what our goal should be here. So as I said, folks, I mention it only to you because it's something that's been omnipresent in our place. We've actually had, across the country, decreases in violence. And as I say, you know, the city of Chicago gets a lot of notoriety, but overall, crime numbers have been decreasing. The area where it has been exploding is in the mental health population in the jails. So you wonder why I'm overcrowded different times? It's the mental health population. They stay longer than everybody else because they have nowhere to go, and they come in on goofy cases. So folks, as I say, I talk to the detainees on a regular basis, and the stories are beyond heartbreaking. They're the one group that never tries to explain away their crime when I'm talking with them. It's so funny. I go into the other living units, and the excuses are absolutely hilarious. And they know I am, in no sense of the word, believing anything they say. And they'll keep going on about it and say, okay, you know, run that alibi defense out. I think it's going to really have traction. And so they go through all that. I go in the mental health units, though. I purposely don't ask them about their cases because I don't want to know about that, because I understand from being a prosecutor, you know, statements people make against their interests, all that stuff. But they can't wait to tell me, oh yeah, I did it. And all they're concerned, though, is, can you help me get a place to stay? That's what they say over and over again. Can you give me a place when I get out of here to stay? And it's just beyond heartbreaking that my answer more often than not is no. You will go out to the streets and whatever happens, happens. And so many of them will tell me, so this is the one place I feel safe, where no one attacks me, no one targets me. I get fed, I get my meds, I got classes I go to. And it's just one of those things they say that we collectively have got to change. And I'm going to keep talking about this over and over again. It's getting some traction nationally, which is great, because that's where a lot of the solutions need to come from. But the solutions, folks, are not hard and they're not expensive. It's just we have to have the will to do it. And I think at the end of the day, we do something like that collectively, we will all feel that we are not necessarily the group of people, the age where we kicked it down the road. We were the ones that took the difficult situations on, head on, and we made it better for our kids and our grandkids. Thank you so much.